As you settle into the stillness of the night, let your mind drift back through the countless centuries, to a time before fields and farms, to a world of ancient forests and wandering tribes. This is the story of the great awakening of humanity, a tale not of kings and conquests, but of seeds and soil, of the first animal to ever befriend a human. It's the story of how our ancestors learned to nurture the earth itself, to build, to create, and to dream of a better tomorrow. Let this epic journey from wilderness to civilization lull you into a deep and restful sleep, where history itself becomes your dream. Our story begins with the most profound and quiet of revolutions, born from the patient, observant eyes of generations of women, as they foraged for wild nuts, fruits, and grains. Moving with the seasons, they noticed a simple miracle: seeds that had accidentally fallen into the soft, disturbed earth around their campsites, where the soil was turned by foot and hand would later sprout into tender new plants. This spark of understanding, this connection between a dropped seed and a future harvest, ignited a fundamental change in the human journey. They began to experiment, to deliberately sow these precious grains into plots of land they had prepared themselves, clearing away stones and loosening the earth. Thus, from the ancient, passive practice of gathering what nature freely offered, the conscious, active art of agriculture was born. This was the moment humanity decided to become a partner with the earth, rather than just a passenger upon it. Clearing a piece of land for these first gardens was a Herculean task, a communal effort that bound the group together. Using stone axes, they would chop into the tough bark of trees, setting controlled fires to clear dense thickets of shrubs and undergrowth. The back-breaking work of pulling out stubborn stumps and roots followed, all to claim a small patch of earth from the relentless wilderness. The first farmers then turned to the soil with simple, ingenious tools. A sturdy stick with a branched end became the world's first wooden hoe, used to break up the clumps of earth before scattering the cherished seeds. When the sun had worked its magic and the golden harvest ripened, they gathered the life-sustaining grain with sickles, painstakingly crafted from wood or bone. Into the splits of these tools were meticulously set sharp, razor-like flakes of flint. This harvested grain was then transformed on flat grinding stones, rubbed and ground into a coarse, nutritious flour. And on the hot stones nestled in the embers of their hearths, women baked the very first loaves of unleavened bread, filling the air with a scent that would become the very smell of home and security for millennia to come. This great agricultural awakening found its most fertile ground in the ancient lands of Western Asia, the natural homeland of wild barley and wheat. It was in this region, so rich in these foundational grasses, that the new, settled way of life first took deep root, flourishing there long before it slowly spread like a gentle wave to distant lands. From this cradle of civilization, the knowledge of sowing and reaping, of waiting and harvesting, traveled along ancient paths. It was carried by migrating people on the threads of early trade into neighboring regions and beyond, forever altering the landscape of the human story. This monumental transition from hunter-gatherer to farmer began over 10,000 years ago, in a time so distant it stretches the very fabric of our imagination. Simultaneously, a parallel revolution was unfolding in the relationship between humans and animals. Men, returning from the hunt, would sometimes bring back the vulnerable young offspring of the animals they had killed. These creatures, fed from hand, sheltered, and cared for, lost their fear and grew tame, becoming accustomed to the sounds and smells of human camps. The very first to cross this threshold was the wolf, evolving into the loyal dog, a companion that not only guarded the settlement from predators, but also became an invaluable partner to hunters, using its keen senses to track and herd game. Emboldened by this success, the practice of taming expanded. It came to include the sturdy pig, the gentle sheep, the nimble goat, and the mighty aurochs, the ancestor of our modern cow. In this way, from the ancient, dangerous tradition of the hunt, the peaceful practice of herding and raising livestock emerged, a development that happened in a similar epoch to the dawn of agriculture. These domesticated animals provided a steady, reliable supply of meat, nourishing milk, warm wool, and durable leather, buffering humanity against the harsh uncertainties of nature. The combined emergence of farming and animal husbandry fundamentally and irrevocably transformed the human experience. Hunters, fishers, and gatherers took only what the natural world spontaneously offered. Their lives were a reflection of the immediate environment, not unlike any other creature in the forest. But farmers and herders were different. They became creators, active participants in their own destiny. They learned to select the best seeds for planting and the strongest animals for breeding, slowly, over generations, shaping the very biology of the plants and animals they depended on. For the first time, human life and prosperity depended not solely on the whims of nature, but increasingly on human ingenuity, foresight, and the sweat of their own brows. This was the birth of a new kind of power, the power of cultivation. As the fires die down to embers and the night deepens, let these thoughts of ancient innovations settle in your mind. The story of humanity is one of constant adaptation, of learning to work with nature to build a more secure world. The bread on our tables, the companionship of our petsit, all began here, with a handful of seeds and a moment of connection. Imagine a world taking its first steps out of the shadows of the past. As humans began to settle down, planting roots in one place, their creativity absolutely exploded. Think about it. For ages, they'd woven simple baskets to carry berries or fish. But now, with a settled life, they needed something better to store the precious grain they were farming. Someone had a brilliant idea. Smeared those woven baskets with a thick layer of wet clay. It worked, kind of. The containers were better, but they were fragile and would turn back to mud if they got wet. Then, a happy accident changed everything. A clay-coated basket must have fallen into the fire. The people watching noticed something incredible. The basket's reeds burned away, but the clay, it transformed in the intense heat, becoming hard, solid, and completely waterproof. This was a game. Suddenly, they could craft pots and bowls directly from clay and fire them in hot pits. For the very first time, they could boil water, cook stews, and make warm porridge. This unlocked new flavors and nutrients, making their food safer and more delicious than ever before. It wasn't just about storage anymore. It was about creating a home, a hearth, a center for the family. And it wasn't just pottery. The simple act of weaving mats for their floor sparked another revolution. The women, who were masters of this craft, took the basic idea of interlacing reeds and grasses and scaled it down. They invented a simple but amazing tool, the loom. They learned the patient art of spinning, twisting wool from their sheep or fibers from flax plants into strong, continuous thread. With these two inventions, spinning and weaving, humanity was no longer reliant on stiff, uncomfortable animal hides. They could now create soft, durable fabrics. Imagine the feeling of wearing woven linen or wool for the first time in newfound comfort and protection that marked a huge leap in human dignity. It was a new chapter, written thread by thread. As their homes became more permanent, so did their communities. Society began to organize itself around the powerful bonds of family and shared beliefs. People who believed they descended from a common ancestor, whether a mythical hero or a sacred animal, formed what we call a clan. When big decisions needed to be made, the clan would gather in a council. But who led these councils? The elders. These weren't just the oldest people. They were the wisest. They were the living libraries of the community, holding the secrets of the hunt, the knowledge of healing plants, the ancient stories, and the moral compass of the people. The elders managed the community, making sure everyone did their part in the fields and that the harvest was shared fairly. They also led the sacred ceremonies. Picture this: the entire community dancing and chanting together, their voices rising as one, asking the unseen forces of nature for rain, for a good harvest, or for success in the hunt. These rituals were the glue that held them together. To keep the community strong, there was a strict rule. You couldn't marry someone from your own clan. This ensured genetic diversity and also built powerful alliances. Often a young man from one clan would marry a young woman from a specific, allied clan. This created a web of relationships, a social and military network that was nearly unbreakable. When several of these related clans lived in the same area, speaking the same language and sharing the same customs, they formed a larger group, a tribe. The tribe was governed by a council of all the clan elders. This council acted like a court, settling disputes and deciding punishments, and the most severe punishment. It wasn't death. It Wasik sighed. To be cast out of the tribe was to be left utterly alone in a world where survival depended on the group. It was a fate many considered worse than death itself, a stark reminder of how much they needed each other. Now, let's step inside their minds. How did these early people see the world? For them, everything was alive. Everything had a spirit. The sun wasn't just a star. It was a divine being, born each morning and dying each night. If you hit a tree and it groaned, that was the tree's spirit crying out. They believed countless spirits lived in every rock, every cloud, every gust of wind. The most powerful of these spirits were honored as gods. It was a world filled with consciousness and intention. So, if everything was alive, you could talk to it. You could ask the sun for warmth, or the rain for water. Kust like you. Ask a neighbor for help. You just had to know the right way to ask. You needed the correct rituals, the right prayers, and most importantly, you had to give a gift to show your respect. What was the most precious gift you could offer? Food, a portion of your own hard-earned harvest, given as a sacred sacrifice to the spirits you depended on. To make these invisible spirits more tangible, people began to give them form. They carved figures from wood, molded statues from clay, and chiseled idols from stone. These weren't just decorations. They were the homes for the spirits, focal points for worship. People would leave offerings for their idols, hoping to keep the spirits happy and benevolent. But this relationship wasn't always one-sided. If a drought came and the crops withered, or if predators attacked their livestock, the people's gratitude could quickly turn to anger. They might scold the idol, turn it to face the wall, or even whip it with small branches, desperately trying to get the lazy or angry spirit to do its job. This intricate dance of innovation, community, and belief shows a world teeming with life, wonder, and a deep, profound connection between humanity and the world. It was just beginning to shape. From a simple clay pot to the complex laws of a tribe, every step was a testament to our ancestors' resilience and ingenuity. As societies grew more complex, crafts that once were common to all began to specialize. While anyone could make a simple pot, creating a sturdy, beautiful vessel required dedicated skill. A potter had to spend years mastering their craft, no longer dividing time between farming and herding, thus becoming the world's first specialized artisan. They began using a rotating potter's wheel for finer shapes and fired their wares in high-temperature kilns, not just the common hearth. Around 9,000 years ago in Western Asia, another transformative craft emerged. People discovered that certain stones, like copper nuggets, would soften in intense heat and could be hammered into useful shapes. Later, they unlocked the secret of extracting pure copper from its ore. They would heat it in a fire, then pour the mesmerizing, molten metal into molds to create sturdy knives, sharp awls, and other revolutionary tools. Artisans also learned to work with gold and silver, fashioning them into beautiful ornaments and symbols of status. While copper tools made life easier, the ore was rare, making these objects precious symbols of emerging wealth and power. Perhaps one of the most backbreaking problems of early farming was solved by the invention of the plow. Breaking the hard sun-baked ground with a light hoe was exhausting. A brilliant innovator devised the idea of using a large, forked log as a giant hoe to be dragged across the field. This was faster, but still required the effort of several people. The ultimate solution was to harness the strength of domesticated animals, like oxen, to pull this heavy implement. The plow, dragged by animal power, could slice through an arid land that no human-powered hoe could ever touch. This allowed people to settle vast, new plains and valleys. Settlements grew larger, and harvests became more abundant, supporting ever-growing populations. With the efficiency of the plow, animal power, and metal tools, the need for the entire community to work together on a single field began to fade, giving way to a new social structure. A more individualized order took hold. The community now consisted of large, extended families, and communal lands were divided into family plots. Each family owned its own livestock, tools, and managed its own household. The harvest they reaped was theirs alone to consume, store, or trade. This new system rewarded individual effort. More skilled and diligent families could gather more grain, build larger herds, and accumulate wealth, becoming more prosperous than their neighbors. Yet, cooperation remained essential for large tasks. Neighbors would still work together to dig an irrigation pond or drain a swamp, bound together by shared location and common needs. This growing wealth and the defense of property also led to organized conflict and the formalization of social classes, while theft within the community was punished severely. Raiding a neighboring tribe to seize their cattle, grain, or jewels was often seen as an act of courage. For these military campaigns, a tribe would elect a war chief, a leader chosen for his strength and cunning. He would gather a band of warriors for defense and for launching raids. The chief, by right of leadership, took a large portion of the spoils, the best weapons, the finest ornaments, the prime captives, distributing the rest among his loyal followers to secure their allegiance. These successful chiefs, their trusted companions, and the most influential elders began to form a distinct social class, the nobility. This privileged status often became hereditary, passing from father to son, who were honored from birth simply because of their family line. The most fertile land and the lioness share of all future plunder were routinely allocated to these leading families. Prisoners of war, once killed or adopted, were now often enslaved by the chief and the nobility, providing a new source of labor and further consolidating their wealth. Inequality had become a permanent feature of tribal life. There were the noble and the common, the wealthy and the poor. Large, fortified settlements, protected by deep ditches, high earthworks, and sturdy wooden walls, grew into the first protusi. Within these walls, the nobility resided in larger houses, served by skilled artisans who crafted their fine clothes, jewelry, and weapons. These central places also housed the tribe's most sacred sanctuaries, where revered idols stood. Here, the chief, now commanding the entire tribal territory, began to wield a power that was less that of a first among equals, and more that of a king. He became a ruler of a defined territory and its people, laying the foundational stones of the first states and the complex world we inhabit today. Thank you for joining me on this captivating journey into the world of history. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like the video, write comments, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories that bring antiquity to life and make it feel closer. Until next time.